now live. So welcome everybody to the second in a series of webinars on hot topics in Southeast Asia's tech industry. This one is about Fintech and all the opportunities, pitfalls, and latest innovations across the financial spectrum. So I'm the host, Stephen Millward, with TechNode Global. And our expert panelists are, I'll introduce one by one. I think you can see them in the same order as me. This order. So first panelist is Anil Argilla, who is the President Director for Indonesia and Cluster Lead for Vietnam at Pfizer, which you know is a multinational biopharmaceutical corporation. And then we have Caecilia Chu, who's co-founder and CEO with YouTrip, a multi-currency travel wallet. And then we have Yang Kan, who is regional manager at Alibaba Cloud's digital intelligence business. So yeah, good. So we have Anil with Pfizer, Caecilia with YouTrip, and Yang Kan with Alibaba. So that's a good lineup. And everybody who is attending, please take a look at the Q&A tab, which is at the bottom of Zoom. That's where you can add in some questions at any time and upvote some other questions that you fancy. And we'll ask questions towards the end. We'll have plenty of time for questions too. Okay, so I think that's everything covered at the start. So let's move on to the first question if we're ready. Why are we witnessing a slow evolution of fintech from payments to more services at this time? Perhaps I can start with Caecilia.
Sure. Really happy and grateful to be here today. So I think speaking from a fintech startup in the region, where we truly start off with payments as our core service, I would say similar to perhaps most other fintechs, the way we see payments, it's truly not the ends. It's only a means to the ends. We like to start with payments within financial services because you know, it has one of the most highest frequency use case. So it actually creates stickiness in the product. And also it allows us to learn a great deal about our user base. So, you know, if I speak from a fintech perspective, especially a payments company perspective, the goal is really to leverage our user base and also leverage what we know, you know, around the behavior and preferences of our users, and think about how do we use technology to harness the, you know, the value around the data, and how do we create new products across the different categories of financial services for, you know, to be the most relevant to our consumers today. So I would say, you know, I think even decades ago when any fintech started, I would say the journey has always been seeing payments as the starting point. But frankly speaking, it's really not the end.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's a journey for your company and some other companies, and it's about stickiness if you use payments at the beginning. Okay, so maybe how about Anil at Pfizer? Because I know you're a healthcare giant company, but do you have that kind of same idea with one thing would be your stickiness angle, and then you can do fintech from there?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on this platform. I'm happy to be here to do this session. And to your introduction, we're a biopharma healthcare company, and healthcare to a large extent probably hasn't used some of this technology as extensively as fintech and other industries have. Okay, and blockchain is a space where we believe there's an immense opportunity for healthcare to participate in. We probably in the early stages, I would actually think that we're just embarking on this journey of looking at opportunities which exist in the way blockchain can be leveraged in healthcare space. But just to give you a broad outline, the areas where we believe there would be an opportunity for us to really create value using blockchain technology in healthcare. Number one would be in or electronic medical records. Okay, and just to put this into perspective, Today, electronic medical records, largely these transactions and database of electronic medical records, are held in a centralized manner in some way or another with a healthcare service provider. But with a blockchain, it can probably make it much more seamless, okay? And it can actually go along with the patient transactions as against it just being a central, not necessarily an integrated, rich database. So that's a clear opportunity which we believe will kind of release an immense value, okay, of every electronic transaction, and could be leveraged for R&D. It can be leveraged for impacting patient benefits better. It can be leveraged for managing healthcare outcomes better. But we're in a very, very early stage of starting to explore that area. The other two areas where I think there are some pilots where we are working on is use of blockchain for tracking supply chain. Okay, there are some pilots which we're working on in that space, and also in clinical research, so including patient enrollment mechanisms and stuff like that. So there's immense opportunity to leverage this technology within healthcare. I would assume probably in the nascent early stage of embarking on this journey and looking at opportunities there. I think it's also important to have other platforms to be integrated and have an ecosystem of partners to start to work together to see how we can really mobilize this. So, and I'm no expert on saying why is it slow. I think, for instance, getting blockchain taken off, I think just getting a network of partners to start to put it together is not an easy activation. Okay, it hasn't been easy activation for other industries as well. Okay, so I assume that will be the first area where we need to really focus on creating those networks of partnerships for us to get this blockchain technology to gain traction. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so that's a journey too, starting with blockchain. Okay. So how about at Alibaba Cloud? What does Yankan feel about all the evolution in the industry? You have a lot of major companies using the data intelligence and the hosting at Alibaba Cloud. So what are you seeing in terms of evolution?
Right. Thanks for the question. I think it's a great question. Yeah, we do serve a lot of fintech company, and then we ourselves operates quite a large fintech business as well. So when I look at the circle on the left on the slide, I see two things. One is on the B2C business, and then one is the B2B business. So payment and billing, that is a typical B2C business. And then if I look at the RegTech or capital markets, that is a typical B2B business. And then when I look at the B2C business, if a normal person, I would have a very similar needs in terms of payments. I will pay my bills, I will pay my merchandise, I will pay my credit cards, and so on. So since the scenario is pretty common, then I could definitely payments is the scenario that can really fly, and then we have already see that. And then when we come into the B2B business, for example, RegTech or capital markets, not every business customer or institutes, they have very similar needs. Different business, every one of them are unique. So we may need to spend a lot more time to understand what are the commonalities among all the businesses, and then what is the common scenario that we can put our resource to develop, to transform. So that is one aspect. And then not everything is slow from what I see. For example, insurance, we have already see a lot of fintech insurance happening in China, for example, so that more and more consumers, they buy insurances or from online channels with a fintech company. That is happening. And then we see money transfer from the consumer ends, that is also happening. And the micro loans in the lending side to the consumers or the SMEs, that is also happening. But really what's slow is on the B2B side, and then I'm sure it will fly, but it just take time to understand what is really the point that we should get into.
Okay, so the B2B side is more diverse, but starting more slowly too, but a huge scope for growth, I guess.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, maybe the next question then. So apart from the huge success in like payment and cross-border remittances, are there any other notable ones that have really, really disrupted traditional financial services like at the moment? What are the biggest disruptors, do you think? Maybe Caecilia again could go first.
So, when I think about, success stories, and I guess, here we are really thinking about impact, perhaps scale, right? So scale of the business overall. I think, when I think about scale and success stories, I think it's an interesting one because if I compare startups with the universal banking models, right, which started decades ago, whether it's a DBS or HSBC, which for the many years, they really get the time to build a universal banking model, meaning they target all segments, offer all products. And I think, if we compare the startups today with these, then we would say, okay, on relatively, that scale is quite small. But if we actually look under the hood, I think what is interesting is that a lot of these fintechs actually have extremely high concentrated market share within certain subsegments, such as millennials, right? So people between the age of 20 to 40 years old. And I think what is significant there is that although on a broad stroke, right, if we look at the entire population, the impact of these fintech newer players looks small. But I think if we look at specific segments, then they're hugely successful. And I think if I look ahead over the next 5 to 10 years, I would say, these people within, the millennials age range, or even slightly younger, the teenagers, right, the Gen Z, I would say, these will then actually become the most lucrative, if not the most important customer segments of any financial institutions, 5 to 10 years down the road, because then they will have entered different life stages and they will need more financial products, right? So, if I look ahead, I would say, many of these fintech or newer players may look less successful, right? We may not call them success stories yet, but I truly think that these little guys are really companies to watch. They will become widely successful when the consumer groups, become more and more important and require more services 5 to 10 years down the road.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, watch what millennials are doing. Okay. Okay. Then how about Anil at Pfizer? What's the biggest disruption right now, do you think?
I don't know if I'll call it a disruption, but I think I distinctly see that there's an opportunity for fintech companies to participate in the healthcare financing space. Okay, there's a huge population worldwide which doesn't necessarily have access to the conventional banking financial space, which potentially, like what Caecilia was saying, could be a very captive target audience of fintech companies. Okay, and affordability and solving for affordability of healthcare and access of healthcare is a well-known worldwide problem. And I'm not necessarily saying that fintech companies can come in there or healthcare companies can partner with fintech companies and solve that problem, because that's a fairly large, complex problem. But if you take it into pieces, there's some part of healthcare financing which needs to be solved by a state, and there's some part of healthcare financing which needs to be solved through private insurance mechanisms. But there's still a large chunk of unsolved patient access, healthcare access issues, which are largely because of inability of a tier of economical population to be able to afford in a moment of time healthcare costs. Okay, and that's largely a cash flow related issue. And fintech companies can potentially solve for that. And I've seen some forms of early ventures, but they started mostly from a non-profit organization perspective or crowdfunding to be able to support families which are struggling with healthcare access issues. But I also see a commercial opportunity for targeted use of AI to identify creditworthiness of some sector of population and see how fintech companies be able to do microfinancing there or other options to solve for affordability. There are some experiments which a few companies have done in Africa, which have worked well. Okay, but they were largely from a non-profit oriented perspective. We are doing few pilots, and one of them is with a startup called HelloDoc in Indonesia, okay, which has also access to Gojek. Okay, and we're figuring out some ways to solve for patient access and affordability, and also mechanics of delivery, etc. Okay, so there's some interesting options to explore there to solve for affordability.
Okay, so like crowdfunding and non-governmental organizations, they've found the problem, but it's going to take businesses, you think, to really solve it for real?
And I think it probably will be, the way I look at it is that there's some part of, if I have to make it very, very simple, it might sound philosophical, but there's some part of the healthcare affordability challenge needs to be solved by a state, and rest of it today is left on individuals, okay, to fund for it from their own pocket. And unfortunately, we don't have aggregated solutions. Okay, so I do see a potential if there's, say, NGOs, crowdfunding organizations, or fintech companies, or microfinancing organizations, plus healthcare platforms which are digital. Okay, if they come together, we should be able to find some aggregated solutions. Okay, so I think we'll have to create an ecosystem where these partners come together naturally and be able to find it. And when we did this pilot with these companies in Indonesia, it wasn't an easy start as well, because the digital companies don't understand healthcare and the regulations of healthcare, etc. And healthcare industry doesn't understand technology. So it takes a while for us to bring these ecosystems together, but I definitely think an aggregated solution is the route forward. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Good. We'll come back a little bit more to microfinancing and healthcare quite soon. Okay. Yeah, Yankan, any thoughts from you on like the biggest disruption right now?
Right. So a couple of notable disruptions I see is that the first one is the customer's expectation, and then second one is touch point. So as expectation, as we actually most of us could notice that we actually expect right now everything is happening in real time. So if I do a money transfer, I should see the dollars in my account in real time. And then I do a payment, I will see that successfully in real time. And everything I want to enjoy that in the real time. So that is one very big change. The second one is the touch point. So traditionally, we are used to the offline services. Like I go to the branch and then I do my things in the counters. But right now, I don't want to do that. I want to have some touch points that I can use my services anytime, any place, 24 hours a day. So these are the two biggest disruption to the traditional financial services. And then what does it mean to the industry is that if we look at the touch points, actually fintech company are so into this what we call the customer operation, like how do we acquire new customers, how do we enlarge my customer database, how do I create a stickiness, how do I make them to refer to their friends, and so on. So this is the new thought, or what we call the internet thought in the nature of fintech compared to the traditional financial services. Then we didn't see that much of this kind of element in the traditional financial services. I think that is probably the biggest disruption I see.
Okay, so that covers all of the consumer side, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, good. So I think that was a lot about the present and a bit about the future. Maybe the next section we could move on to, which is, fintech plus healthcare. I think there's a lot of scope for growth there, and we have Anil from Pfizer with us. So maybe could you tell us in a bit, even more detail, how does microfinancing for healthcare work, and what have you done with it already, and where is it heading?
Yeah, so I think just to build on what has been said earlier, I think fintech companies obviously they have kind of found ability to create value of targeting customers way better than conventional financial institutes have been able to do in the past, right? And now we in healthcare also find it very difficult to go direct to patients because of regulatory barriers. Okay, and anything which we do as a large-scale campaign without having targeted approach usually doesn't yield the same kind of result. Okay, so what we really found in this tie-up of working with a healthcare platform and the fintech company would be that the use of AI to be able to do a lot more targeted effort. Okay, and for us, I think also in healthcare we see data privacy and patient information privacy requirements lot more regulated. Okay, and there are ways to find solutions around that. So I think I touched upon it in the blockchain technology could be one way to solve for it. Okay, and then the question would come, who would own the data today? Healthcare data is held centrally either by the people who provide healthcare services or by research institutes in some form or another. Okay, but if you take it to a blockchain technology, then potentially it might become sovereign data of an individual. Okay, and the individual probably will be able to provide consent to where the data would be appropriately used. Okay, and in a way, it could potentially even become a Bitcoin. Okay, every transaction could be in Bitcoin, every data point could be in Bitcoin. Okay, so there's some opportunities for us to look at it from that perspective. But coming specifically to your question on the fintech model which we use, it's not really a fintech model, but the platform which we used was actually a tie-up between and healthcare service providers, health organization, which is a social organization, plus a healthcare platform which is digital, HelloDoc. Okay, and Gojek, which is got a huge consumer base and has an immense potential to do targeted AI work, but also has an ability to manage payments. Okay, so bringing all this together to be able to find an affordability solution is what we're trying with this program in Indonesia. Okay, but we're trying multiple other programs across the world to see how we can solve for that. I also see, I think I haven't touched upon that in my earlier comments, but blockchain can also potentially address much more transparency if we bring it to the supply organization to address the counterfeiting issue which exists in healthcare as well. Okay, it might not be something which is an opportunity for fintech companies or other companies to participate in. Okay, but I think it also addresses some fundamental issues which we have in conventional mechanics of healthcare. Okay, so it might be an opportunity for digital companies to create that value of saying a blockchain-driven data mechanism and a network potentially will solve for some of the evils which exist in our physical mechanics of healthcare deliveries. Yeah.
Okay. One follow-up question so that we have a good concrete idea of what's happening already. What have you been doing with HelloDoc and Gojek in Indonesia?
So we've launched a digital patient access program without going into too much detail because this is not about the product itself, but it primarily is a platform through which a patient should be able to enroll onto a program, be able to consult with a specialist, get a special affordable access plan, be able to have the product delivered, because Gojek is also involved in the delivery mechanism. Okay, and also adhere to the treatment and be able to get patient education material, etc., etc. So it's a fully comprehensive linked up plan. And that's the reason I said it's an aggregated solution, because we have a digital partner, a healthcare partner, we have a delivery partner like Gojek, and a payment partner also. Okay, and we also have an institute, which is a healthcare institute, which is a non-profit institute, which ensures that patient is kept in the center of this whole process. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Good. So that's a good crossover of healthcare, fintech plus transport. Okay. Good. Okay. So how about on Alibaba Cloud side? How does Yankan feel about crossovers there? For example, maybe you'd be thinking crossovers like fraud management, credit scoring, compliance. Is that right?
Yeah, so since I'm from Alibaba Cloud, which is a cloud company, I would probably bring up the crossover to see that what does fintech to do with cloud. So definitely what we have seen in the market is that every fintech company are leveraging cloud because that the fintech company will provide the customer trustable services, and then the clouds, the nature of cloud, which is elastic, and then the pay as you go, and then the platform as a service provide the best place to host the fintech applications. And then another side of cloud is that for the data intelligence platforms, which is as we know that the data is a raw material for artificial intelligence. So the big data platform is quite important for any of the application, for example, fraud management, credit scoring, eKYC, and things like that. So with the cloud's data intelligence platform, then it is kind of a jumpstart for fintech companies to get on board, and then they start to accumulate the data assets to the organization, and then so that we can create more data product. For example, credit scoring. That is what we see. That is what we ourselves has been done on the Sesame Credit. That is a data product based on our data assets. And then fraud management, that is a similar thing. So what I see is that a fintech company has, in nature, will have a lot of connections with cloud, with artificial intelligence, and then the big data platforms.
Okay. So you mentioned Sesame Credit. Is that a good example of what we can see more of in the years ahead? And for those who don't know, it's like a China-oriented service from Alipay, right? And then you can get, I think maybe loans, but you can tell us more. But so Sesame Credit, is that a good model?
Yes, it's a very interesting data product. So what we do is that it actually starts with our e-commerce needs. So when we do e-commerce needs, people need to trust, the buyer needs to trust the seller. They need to trust each other. And then the Sesame Credit is something that we want to give people a credit score. And then this credit score is determined by their behavior of, for example, transactions, and then behavior in terms of what they do in the e-commerce space, so that we put that into a score so that people can trust each other better. And then the people will try their best to improve their credit scores. And then when our business is getting more and more into more and more space, for example, local services or even the live video streaming kind of businesses, then we have more and more data points to enrich the credit scores, which is the Sesame Credits. So right now it is actually adopted not only in our ecosystem, it is actually adopted in a lot of no matter offline business or in our daily lives in China.
Okay, okay. It's not too different from the old-fashioned credit scores, I guess. So that have been around for decades.
Right.
But it's more data-driven, maybe.
Right. So what the key difference is about, probably we use a lot of alternative data. Traditionally, if we do the credit bureau kind of credit scoring, we have a fixed list of data that we use, and then the fixed model that we use. But we are trying to be innovative, and then we're trying to make something enhanced or richer. So we leverage a lot of alternative data to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. That just means like how people are using services or something. Okay. Sorry, Anil, you have a point too.
Yeah. So no, it's interesting that the conversation went into that area, and I had an interesting conversation with one of the fintech companies, which is looking at microfinancing and across Europe and Asia, and largely in emerging markets. While it seems like they're trying to mimic what is there in the financial conventional space of credit rating, the sources of inputs, okay, makes the big difference. Okay, in a banking system, it's purely the database of your banking transactions. Okay, but what these companies are really looking at is multiple sources of data. So not really, you know, I like this trust part, which I think you spoke about. Okay, they given reliability rating, which is what is the potential of default. Okay, which is the most important in microfinancing. Okay, as against giving a credit rating which says, okay, this guy can take $5,000 or $2,000 of a loan. Okay, they have a rating which talks about the reliability, and which I found it very interesting. And that's when I said there's a fantastic opportunity for a microfinancing company like that, which has that kind of a capability to partner with a healthcare service provider or a pharma company to solve for many people who potentially need that cash flow in a very short period of time, but they don't have access to conventional banking and financial loans. Okay, but if you have a reliable rating mechanism, okay, which reduces the potential NPAs in those microfinancing opportunities, it really takes. So I think what I really found it different was that they were not using conventional data sources.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So I think we're talking about unusual data sources, like, for example, maybe somebody who takes less than 1 minute to fill in the form. That could be fraudulent, or somebody who applies at 3 a.m. local time, then that could be, you know, a bot or something like that. Okay. Okay, good.
I'm not going to give away their formula. I don't know the formula either, but I think it's a combination of what you're saying, plus they also do some kind of psychometric questions in the way they do the enrollment of the individuals. Okay, and they have their mechanics to have some kind of predictive validity of saying that, you know, if these are the 5 inputs which come together in this particular manner, we can reliably say that this person would be in grade 4 and their default rates will be X amount.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So, okay, so we've heard about lots of crossovers on fintech there. How about from Caecilia? Any kind of crossovers or in the multi-currency and cross-border areas?
Yeah, so when I think about crossover and also potential partnerships, I would say, you know, the first wave of fintech collaboration, you know, it's mostly around fintech with perhaps a financial service provider, but I would really see that the second phase is truly happening right now, like what Anil has mentioned, you know, how a pharma company actually is, you know, working with tech giants like Gojek and so forth. You know, where I see this is, you know, for example, for ourselves, when we first started back in 2016, 4 years ago, you know, as a fintech company, you can imagine the kind of conversations, you know, partnership conversations that we could have with banks, you know, other payments companies, tech companies, or general corporates, right? Whether it's healthcare, whether it's general retail, hospital, you know, hotel, and so forth. You can imagine that kind of conversations really go a wide range. But I would say, you know, if I were to summarize, I think the value of fintech was first most understood. I would say most understood by financial company themselves. I would say, you know, 3-4 years back. Because, you know, using digital technology is really about delivering a service for the end consumer a lot faster and cheaper. So I think a lot of fintech, even ourselves, you know, when we first started, we are truly a tech enabler, right, for some of our partners. In Singapore, we launched with EasyLink, which is a local travel transport payments network provider. So, you know, to EasyLink, we are essentially a partner in their digital transformation journey. But fintechs will grow up ourselves too. So, in the recent 2 years, we also have grown up, we scale our team, we collected a number of licenses, secure all the licenses so that we actually now own our licensing and infrastructure end to end. And they would allow us to actually enter phase 2, right? The second wave of collaborations where we are now, in the position to actually speak with airlines, hotel groups, or even general shopping malls or retail partners where we can now have newer crossover products to truly innovate something new for the consumer. So I almost see this as an evolution in the industry where when we first started out, I think most of the banks are I guess more in tune with the value that fintech could potentially bring. But I would say now, conversations and market sentiments has truly evolved a lot. I think now the potential for us to partner with more, more diverse set of corporates is really here. So we are actually quite excited about what we can do, over the next few years or so.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Okay, so like a growth stage startup, you're saying like, call me maybe, when you're talking to the tech giants and any of the giants. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, so
good.
Definitely moving from a more diverse set of crossovers. So yeah, definitely see that happening.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Thank you. I think the next section, let's move on to the next section before we can go to the Q&As. So thinking like beyond the virus situation, which will hopefully be fading away soon, will the pandemic change the fintech industry in some way once it's over? Maybe you have some observations from your own company about how it could change. Possibly let's start back again with Caecilia.
Sure. So I think given the pandemic situation, I think there are two observations perhaps I can share. One is from a customer standpoint. I think the digital adoption in doing any kind of transactions has obviously moving online and digital. This has surely given us very strong boost during this time. So obviously in our platform, we do see our e-commerce payments actually grow at least 20% on a month-to-month basis. So, people are certainly moving online. But I will also say from a fintech industry perspective, we are actually quite excited. I think over the last 2 years, there are lots of many kind of small, new emerging companies, very small startups trying all sort of different things. I would say the market is actually quite crowded over the last 2 years. Lots of new ideas, new companies. But I think what is going forward, why it is exciting for us is because I think with the kind of pandemic happening, I think we will be able to see more focused efforts. More concentrated and consolidated potentially market share, because with lesser number of companies and given the current financial climate, I would also expect all these fintechs being a lot more financially disciplined as well, which essentially give rise to a stronger company when we come out of the crisis. So personally, I'm quite excited about where the fintech industry is trending going forward.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you. That makes sense. Maybe moving on to Yang Kan at Alibaba Cloud. Any thoughts on post-virus?
Right. So after COVID-19, actually during COVID-19, we see a lot of businesses are seeking for their business continuity plans. And then one of the most important business continuity plan is to have their online channel. And then after COVID-19, we see that becomes a must-have instead of just innovation. So those opens up a lot of opportunities. Actually, of course, in retail, customer is looking at omni-channel marketing, omni-channel transactions, and so on. And then there are various type of marketing tactics. For example, right now the live marketing, you do the live show, and people will buy billions of products. That is happening right now. And then there is a flash sale, there is a group deal, and then there is social referral marketing tactics happening. So those are going to fly. And then coming back to the financial institutes, or fintech companies, actually we are actually approached by quite a few financial institutes as well. They are looking for advices from us on how are they going to transform that into omni-channel. So to have their online channels while keeping their offline channels, and then having customer have a unified experience of whether they go to online or offline or a mixed way. So this is definitely a very big opportunity that we have already seen, and that we are very excited to work on.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense too. Okay. And how about Anil? What are you seeing or thinking for post-virus?
Yeah, so for me, I'm not too sure about how this directly impacts fintech context, but to the comments from Caecilia as well, we definitely think that physical flow of patients towards clinics and hospitals will potentially be held back. People will prefer to consult online, okay, as far as possible. Okay, so people will prefer to not have physical contact with an healthcare service provider, okay, as much as possible. But you can't completely take it out. So in the past, I think telemedicine and healthcare platforms, unfortunately, did not get too much traction. Okay, and two, they were also bound with a lot of regulatory constraints from the government. Okay, so for me, I think I see two things happening here post-COVID. One is individuals will prefer to want to gravitate towards some digital platforms. Okay, so that flow will change, and people, all of us, will all prefer. If we have a cough and cold, we used to run to a GP in the past, but if we have a cough and cold today, we probably would like to consult with somebody online as against run to a GP, right? So that behavior is definitely going to change. And two, because this whole process has brought healthcare to the fore, and finding innovative ways to deal with healthcare to the core, even in the government's eyes, I would believe that the governments would also find innovative regulations to bring telemedicine and healthcare platforms, which are digital platforms, into the play much earlier than what would have happened otherwise. Okay, so with those two coming in, I'm sure that payments will also have to happen online, and that's where fintech companies will come into the play. Yeah.
Okay, so telemedicine didn't really happen beforehand, you're saying, but
it happened in some forms in some countries, but it's not. It's nowhere close to the potential of what it do. Okay, for several reasons. It could be social behavior. It could be constraints of what you can get done in from a diagnosis perspective to a consultation perspective to delivery mechanisms perspective. What you can get done virtually versus physically. Okay, but now I think there will be a lot more keenness to make it work, both from society perspective and from the state perspective. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think you mentioned government help. What would that involve?
Regulations. I can see, for instance, many of the countries during the COVID period itself, the governments passed out regulations to ease what could be done online from a healthcare delivery mechanism perspective. Hospitals by themselves have also started participating in some form of telemedicine, not a very sophisticated digital platform, but whatever platforms they had, okay, they were trying to leverage them to the best. Okay, so I think it will give an immense opportunity for companies and startups which have invested in creating healthcare telemedicine delivery mechanism platforms to really take off from here. Okay, and that's what I really see, and I think it comes to the fore. Okay, will it happen overnight? I'm not too sure. Okay, but it will definitely happen post-COVID. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think now might be the perfect time to jump to the Q&A tab. excuse me. I guess we should start with the most upvoted one. So e-wallets like Alipay and WeChat Pay have been widely adopted in China. Apart from providing monetary incentives for consumers to adopt payments from the onset, what should e-wallets providers do to sustain continuous usage? Given that more and more e-wallet services are coming on board. Yeah, that's true. There are a lot of rivals in Indonesia. How many companies in Indonesia have like the wallet license? I think it's like a couple of dozen. Okay, so how about, I know Yang Kan is at Alibaba Cloud, not at Ant Financial, but would you like to answer first?
Sure. So actually, I'll give an example about what Alipay has done. So if you noticed from late last year, Alipay have rearranged the pages or the rankings of the elements in Alipay. So it is actually getting to the diversified services aside from the traditional financial services. So Alipay introduced the business on the local services, like for example, food delivery. That's a typical one, and then you can arrange for the plumbers to go to somebody's house and then provide repairing services, and then that could be another good examples. And so with these local services, there will be more stickiness to be created, and then also we are getting into for example, the smart tourism, smart hotel, but during this COVID-19, things are getting slower, but we are getting into this as well, so that to find out more scenarios which is relevant to payments, but adding more convenience or values to the consumers. So that is something that we are already getting into, and then that has been proven that increases the stickiness a lot. So that is what we do with Alipay. To sustain the continuous usage. Yeah.
Okay, so local services. Okay, I think we've seen Grab and Gojek do both. So that's the super app strategy, perhaps. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, super app is super app is. Thank you for bringing that up. Super app is kind of a good way to go, because nobody wants to install 1,000 of apps in their phones. But we do have more than 1,000 services. So what do we do? And then the super apps have traffic, and then onboard on the super apps and then create mini programs. That is something that we have seen a lot of cases happening.
Okay. I've interviewed Caecilia before, and I know she's talked about a multitude of services, and that could be how a startup builds their company. So do you have any thoughts on holding on to e-payment users?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting where in the question itself it says a lot of wallets provide monetary incentives for consumers to adopt, meaning either you need to give a promotion for people to actually transact with you, or perhaps a lot of upfront incentives for people to download the app. Actually, for us for us as YouTrip, actually we didn't give a lot of free money per se. People naturally want to use our service because we provide the savings around all the foreign currency transactions, right? So as compared to your normal credit and debit card, you can save at least 3% for every single transaction. And we provide this consistently as a value proposition. So where I want to add is that we are not necessarily, just providing the monetary, free money per se, but we are actually delivering a cheaper service and more real time, to Yang Kan's point earlier, a cheaper and more real-time service at a substantially lower cost structure. So we can actually do it sustainably. I don't see payments as our loss leader. It is actually a sustainable business by itself. But of course, on top of it, in order to gain additional wallet, share of wallets among our users, then we need to diversify our line of financial businesses. So, some ways that we thought about doing, and because as a startup, so we are more flexible and potentially more nimble, we use a lot of partnerships. So, again, initially we in the EasyLink partnership in Singapore, a lot of our users actually use the YouTrip card domestically when they ride a bus, when they ride a train. In Thailand, we also partner with Kasikorn Bank. So besides payment and Forex, we are really, co-developing with them over a wider range of services, whether it's insurance and other things that we can provide in the country through the partnership. So I think as a fintech, our goal obviously is to tackle more of the financial needs of the person on our platform, and yes, certainly more than just providing monetary incentives.
Okay, good. So yeah, that's your different way of keeping e-payment users. Okay, thank you. So I can see the next question on the Q&A tab, which yeah, it's quite convenient because we can get, let's see. Yeah, good. Yeah, sorry, it's about healthcare, so that's convenient. We can get Anil to answer this one first, I guess. What would you say is the biggest challenge to blockchain adoption in healthcare?
Well,
yeah, and that's for Anil,
like what I started by saying, I think we're in an early stage of really looking at the opportunity of blockchain technology usage in healthcare. So I don't know if there's a distinct barrier from that perspective, but the way I would look at it is that for any of these potential opportunities to be truly leveraged, we need a network of partners to come together to make that happen. Okay, so I think that would be potentially some kind of a rate limiting factor to be able to, how quickly can you get those network of partners together? And two, healthcare data is also highly regulated. Okay, the governments regulate who can have access to patient data, what form of data is available at what stage, research-related data, which organizations can have access to it and which organizations cannot have access to it. Okay, so there's some level of play which eventually we'll have to cross the barrier of talking to the states and the governments to get them to see the value of creating a richer database than our conventional mechanisms through blockchain. So that potentially could also be a barrier which we need to cross as we get there. But I don't think there's a distinct barrier which is holding us back. It's more of the fact that we're in an early stage of exploring this opportunity. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay, it's early. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, yeah, we've got time for another question. So here's one: with cyber fraud on the rise, are you seeing higher adoption of eKYC solutions? I think those are just anti-fraud solutions. Yang Kan at Alibaba Cloud can tell us more clearly.
Yeah, sure. So regarding to eKYC, yeah, sure. Regarding to eKYC, I don't think there is a limit about that because we always want to know our customer better. And then we always need to leverage more data sources to find out more insights from our customer. So I haven't seen any people tell me that they have done enough KYC already. So definitely with the cyber fraud on the rise, we will see a lot of higher adoption to the eKYC. And then actually in the market, there are more and more startups or companies provide the eKYC solutions, not only on the data services, or they are providing the eKYC methodologies to do that. And then that is not just in the fintech or financial industry. There are a lot of other industries are doing this eKYC as well. So this is a big potential. And then always there needs to be data to be supported. The eKYC needs to be supported by more data, and then that is where we can work on.
Okay. All right. Would anybody like to choose a question from that tab rather than me just picking one myself? There are a few more.
I'm happy to answer the first one, if it's all right with you.
Oh, yeah, please do. It says, what are the top items travelers spent using YouTrip wallet?
I love this question. So during circuit breaker, so a lot of our users actually are buying from Alibaba's Taobao platform. I think everyone enjoy budget shopping, and a lot of games purchase with Nintendo, and a lot of purchases from Amazon in the US, where they really have a very wide range of merchandise. But before COVID, let's say last year when people are heavily traveling, we also see some interesting market differences. So our portfolio in Singapore spend the most around dining. So they spend a lot in, restaurants, whereas some of our portfolios in other countries like Thailand, that they spend the most on actually shopping, retail shopping. When they visit a store, elsewhere when they're traveling. So there are some interesting trends there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's inevitably changed in the past couple of months, right? Okay. Okay, thank you. Any others that you would fancy picking out from the Q&A tab? We've got credit risk, regulation. Anything you fancy?
I find there's an interesting question about how does a company decide if they should build or buy a software storage technology?
Okay.
Yeah, this is quite interesting because we used to build a software by developing by the business itself, or buy a commercial software. But nowadays there is another clear option, which is cloud. So definitely you can subscribe or rent a software or storage without spending your efforts to build it, or you pay a license to buy the whole software. So that is not only the softwares, but the platform of building the software if you want to have more flexibilities, or even you just rent infrastructures to build the platform or software as well. So yeah, I think that is the third option, and how company decide is really to evaluate the cost and return on investments. Okay.
Does this apply equally to fintech companies, or any special cases for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we have already seen that the fintech company are naturally using cloud on this part, because because fintech company normally as a startup, nobody wants to spend $1 million to buy a software upfront. So adopting cloud is a natural choice.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's good. Any final call on the questions, or I guess we should wrap it up after an hour. How do you all feel? Anything else to grab? No? Okay,
there was a question specifically on healthcare to Caecilia and me. Okay. Health. It was health education. I think if I read it right, patient education, not health education.
Oh, right. Yeah. It says, like, for example, health coaching and things like that.
Yeah. So it's a complex subject, but my own personal take on it, and I'll ask Caecilia to comment. My own personal take on it is that education by itself, let it be health education or disease management related education or patient management related education, any form of education, I think what digital platforms provide as an advantage over conventional education mechanisms is that it can bring continuity. Okay. And conventional, because I have to be in INSEAD to learn this, and I have to be with this doctor to learn this, or I have to go to so-and-so hospital site to learn this. Okay. Digital platforms can help you bring continuity. But the challenge has been that the reliability of which platform to go to, and socialization of those platforms. And I've seen that there's no lack or dearth of knowledge which lies digitally on health education, but reliability and which source to go to actually holds people back from really leveraging that more effectively. Okay. Maybe Caecilia, you might want to add to it. Yeah.
I actually really agree with Anil's point of view. For me, I'm really not an expert in healthcare. But if I just think of it from a consumer standpoint myself, then I would fully agree what Anil said. It would be great to know which is the go-to platform that I can trust and I can use often on a continuous basis. So I fully agree.
Okay. Okay, so that means trust on both like the coach's side and the consumer side. Okay. All right, good. I think that might be a good point to wrap this all up. So thank you very much indeed to Caecilia from YouTrip, to Anil from Pfizer, to Yankan from Alibaba Cloud. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to all our webinar attendees as well. We'll have another webinar for you in June. So stay safe, and thank you all for tuning in. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stu. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.